Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the Hunt Collection Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Chris Codina, and I don't think we have anything really in the way of updates this week. Not much has changed since I last recorded. If you listened to the last episode, it was recorded late anyways, mostly because of a health thing. And I also mentioned as sort of a joke reason as to why the last episode was late, that I'm very much obsessed with Monster Hunter World. Although there's some parts in it that I find very frustrating, but that would be spoiler territory, and we won't get into that. But I can say that I very much enjoy the Insect Glaive, even though getting the buffs can be annoying on a moving target, especially if they're like a smaller monster. That's not kind of like my main character. That's what it's a female character. That's what she's using. I did have her using the heavy bow gun, but which was fun, and I still might bust it out now and then. But I was just kind of like, well, I want to get in on the action instead of just kind of like standing back and shooting things the whole time. I have another character using the gun lance, which is pretty cool, except there's just not much to it. It's basically just kind of blasting them, just smashing and blasting. And then on a third character I made to play with my brother and my cousin, although we've been having issues with that because apparently the servers for the game are having all sorts of issues. I was going to try the bow, but I ended up going in a completely different direction and trying the switch axe, which is very, very fun to use. I can say that for sure. And it seems pretty strong early on when you make the Great Jagras switch axe that has the exhaust file in there. So you're just beating up on these monsters and they're just tiring out. It's really fun. But if you're not playing the game, maybe check it out. It's pretty fun. It has some frustrating moments, and it's definitely not like a button masher or like that, and it's a very grindy game. Like, that's the whole thing. You go and you kill monsters with this whole purpose of getting stronger so you can go kill bigger monsters. As far as the story this week, I don't think I mentioned it on the last episode, Anglerfish. I did like that story, and it was kind of giving me vibes of another story that's more of a classic, a more well known. So I decided let me read that one too, and sort of do like a little theme, especially because these are a little bit closer together than I normally record. But yeah, that story is called Mr. Widemouth. You might heard of it. Like I said, it's kind of one of those where it's like a classic status. People know this one. I suppose spoiler, but the reason it reminds me of that because it has another sort of like a child's imaginary friend being, sinister in its own way. Let's I think we're just gonna dive into it, right? You ready? I think I'm ready. There's not really much more need to say about that. This is Mr. Widemouth. During my childhood, my family was like a drop of water in a vast river, never remaining in one location for long. We settled in Rhode Island when I was 8, and there we remained until I went to college in Colorado Springs. Most of my memories are rooted in Rhode Island, but there are fragments in the attic of my brain which belong to the various homes we had lived in when I was much younger. It's pretty strong language in that opening paragraph. It paints a very nice picture. I like that. It doesn't feel like forced flowery or anything like that. It just, it paints a very good picture. Basically saying that, we moved around a lot when I was a kid, and Rhode Island was kind of home base, but he kind of has, snippets of everything, our narrator. Most of these memories are unclear and pointless. chasing after another boy in the backyard of a house in North Carolina, trying to build a raft to float on the creek behind the apartment we rented in Pennsylvania, and so on. But there's one set of memories which remains as clear as glass, as though they were just made yesterday. I often wonder whether these memories are simply lucid dreams produced by the long sickness I experienced that spring, but in my heart, I know they are real. We were living in a house just outside the bustling metropolis of New Vineyard, Maine, population 643. It was a large structure, especially for a family of 3. There were a number of rooms that I didn't see in the 5 months we resided there. In some ways, it was a waste of space, but it was the only house on the market at the time, at least within an hour's commute to my father's place of work. The day after my 5th birthday, attended by my parents alone, I came down with a fever. The doctor said I had mononucleosis, which meant no rough play and more fever for at least another 3 weeks. It was horrible timing to be bedridden. We were in the process of packing our things to move to Pennsylvania, and most of my things were already packed away in boxes, leaving my room barren. My mother brought me ginger ale and books several times a day, and these served the function of being my primary form of entertainment for the next few weeks. Boredom always loomed just around the corner, waiting to rear its ugly head and compound my misery. I know obviously that's not what the narrator was trying to say, but when it said, his mother bringing him ginger ale and books was part of his primary form of entertainment, the whole, ginger ale, I'm being entertained by ginger ale. Obviously he's talking about the books, but, yeah, dumb thing, but that went through my head when I read that. But yeah, not too much to say at the moment. He's just kind of setting this scene and all that. It's good, strong, scene setting, that we're kind of set in this house that's too big for, a family of 3. We have our narrator, who was, at 5 years old, here. He mentions it was his 5th birthday, that he gets mono, so he's kind of bedridden, just kind of setting the scene, and it's pretty good. It paints a good picture, and nothing seems too, frivolous or, just kind of, pulled out of the air. Let's continue. I don't exactly recall how I met Mr. Widemouth. I think it was about a week after I was diagnosed with mono. My first memory of the small creature was asking him if he had a name. He told me to call him Mr. Widemouth, because his mouth was large. In fact, everything about him was large in comparison to his body. His head, his eyes, his crooked ears, but his mouth was by far the largest. "You look kind of like a Furby," I said as he flipped through one of my books. Mr. Widemouth stopped and gave me a puzzled look. "Furby? What's a Furby?" I shrugged. "You know, the toy. The little robot with the big ears. You could pet and feed them, almost like a real pet." "Oh," Mr. Widemouth resumed his activity. "You don't need one of those. They aren't the same as having a real friend." And I'm reading this on the Creepypasta wiki, and posted here along with the story is a black and white, I guess, spooky image of a Furby, which is pretty fun. People know what Furbies are, right? Those haven't been a thing for a while, right? Jeez. So yeah, maybe the visual representation is needed for people who don't know what Furbies are. Oh boy. Anyways, let's continue. I remember Mr. Widemouth disappearing every time my mother stopped by to check on me. "I lay into your bed," he later explained. "I don't want your parents to see me, because I'm afraid they won't let us play anymore." We didn't do much during those first few days. Mr. Widemouth just looked at my books, fascinated by the stories and pictures they contained. The 3rd or 4th morning after I met him, he greeted me with a large smile on his face. "I have a new game we can play," he said. "We have to wait until after your mother comes to check on you, because she can't see us play it. It's a secret game." After my mother delivered more books and soda at the usual time, Mr. Widemouth slipped out from under the bed and tugged my hand. "We have to go to the room at the end of this hallway," he said. I objected at first, as my parents had forbidden me to leave my bed without permission, but Mr. Widemouth persisted until I gave in. The room in question had no furniture or wallpaper. Its only distinguishing feature was a window opposite the doorway. Mr. Widemouth darted across the room and gave the window a firm push, flinging it open. He then beckoned me to look out at the ground below. We were on the second story of the house, but it was on a hill, and from this angle, the drop was farther than 2 stories due to the incline. "I like to play pretend up here," Mr. Widemouth explained. "I pretend that there's a big, soft trampoline below this window, and I jump. If you pretend hard enough, you bounce back up like a feather. I want you to try." There's another picture here, and it's somebody, I don't know if it's someone made this and then the Mr. Widemouth story was spawned from it, or someone made Mr. Widemouth fan art. You'll see it if you click on the link below, but it's kind of looks like sort of a lemur type creature, or it's just like a furry little creature with a kind of the stereotypical creepypasta, big round black eyes with just kind of like an iris in the middle, and then the big wide mouth full of sharp teeth, and kind of it's almost cute, but obviously it has sharp teeth and it's sinister in a way. It's fun. But yeah, like as far as the story, you kind of see where it was about the anglerfish, why that was giving me vibes about this. We have this creature, this imaginary thing, whatever, we don't know really, just kind of popped up out of nowhere, trying to entice our narrator into jumping out the window into what would most likely be a deadly fall. And, he's trying to, disguise it as playing and all that. Which is, it's pretty good. It's pretty creepy, right? Let me continue before I get into too much more. I was a 5-year-old with a fever, so only a hint of skepticism darted through my thoughts as I looked down and considered the possibility. "It's a long drop," I said. "But that's all part of the fun. It wouldn't be fun if it was only a short drop. If it were that way, you may as well just bounce on a real trampoline." I toyed with the idea, picturing myself falling through thin air only to bounce back to the window on something unseen by human eyes. But the realist in me prevailed. "Maybe another time," I said. "I don't know if I have enough imagination. I could get hurt." Mr. Widemouth's face contorted into a snarl. But only for a moment. Anger gave way to disappointment. "If you say so," he said. He spent the rest of the day under my bed, quiet as a mouse. You like my Mr. Widemouth voice, by the way? I just kind of pulled that one out of thin air. I don't know. I'm kind of growing on me. Although I keep on forgetting what it is. Hopefully it doesn't sound too inconsistent. I just kind of want to keep reading this. It's not too long. Maybe we could just plow through the whole thing and talk about it at the end. We'll see. Unless someone jumps out at me, I'm just going to kind of keep going. The following morning, Mr. Widemouth arrived holding a small box. "I want to teach you how to juggle," he said. "Here's some things you can use to practice before I start giving you lessons." I looked in the box. It was full of knives. That's a good line, right? It's simple. I mean, it's almost predictable, but just, here, practice juggling these. And I looked in the box. It was full of knives. It's a good line. It's good and punchy, right? It delivers that shock, in a good, a good voice, the way that it's delivered sort of, not matter of factly, just like I said, it's boom, boom. I looked in the box, it was full of knives. It's just, it's a really strong delivery of the sort of, the scare. You can imagine, if it was a movie, he looks in the box and then, low angle shot of the boy opening the box and looking in, And then, high angle shot looking down from behind the boy, and you see it's just full of knives, and then there's the big, like, orchestra sting or whatever to, give you the jump scare, and all that. And when you see it's full of knives, like, you can imagine that it's a good, it's a good delivery of that line, even if it is simple and all that. My parents will kill me, I shouted, horrified that Mr. Widemouth had brought knives into my room. Objects that my parents would never allow me to touch. I'll be spanked and grounded for a year. Mr. Widemouth frowned. It's fun to juggle with these. I want you to try. I pushed the box away. I can't. I'll get in trouble. Knives aren't safe to just throw in the air. Smart 5-year-old. Mr. Widemouth's frown deepened into a scowl. He took the box of knives and slid under my bed, remaining there the rest of the day. I began to wonder how often he was under me. It's another good one, right? I said I was going to plow through this, but yeah, we're getting like good stuff here, right? Just these kind of good like little points, because what it is, like, I mean, part, like, kind of the what's the word I'm looking for? Like, the scare that is the forefront is this creature trying to convince this child to do, things that'll hurt him, probably kill him, stuff like that. And then, like, we kind of get this, it's something that the narrator hadn't mentioned, so, like, we don't really think about it because obviously there's the pressing matters of, him trying to, get him to jump out a window or juggle with knives. It's the fact that he's under his bed the whole time. And now it just kind of hit our narrator, and it hits us at the same time. Like, how often is he underneath there, just thinking of ways to kill him or something, and and this is a 5-year-old little boy who's stricken with a very rough illness, and, he kind of doesn't have anything to do. And it kind of brings the question of, where did Mr. Widemouth come from? Is he a creature that lived in the house? Is he from, like, a fever dream? Is he, is it like hallucination from the boy's fever and all that? It's a question that, it's pretty interesting. And it's also, like, it's part of the scare factor, the tension. It's like, kind of, what is this? And, where did it come from? And, in a way, it's almost scarier, like, if it's just the boy's having, like, these fever, like, hallucinations and all that, and, that potentially hurt himself, and it's not something, an outside force that's trying to convince him. Let's continue. I started having trouble sleeping after that. Mr. Widemouth often woke me up at night, saying he put a real trampoline under the window, a big one that I couldn't see in the dark. I always declined and tried to go back to sleep, but Mr. Widemouth persisted. Sometimes he stayed by my side until early in the morning, encouraging me to jump. He wasn't so fun to play with anymore. It's really disturbing, right? Like, this kind of, like, little fuzzy, almost cute, like, kind of, I think maybe the best way I can describe it, it's, like, sort of looks like Gizmo from Gremlins, but, like, halfway to transforming into a gremlin. So he's still, like, cute and fluffy, or, like, cute and fuzzy, but he's getting, like, the big wide mouth with sharp teeth and all that. And it's just imagine this thing sitting, on the bed next to a sick 5-year-old boy, just trying to just jump out the window, jump. Go on, jump. It's fine. You'll be fine. There's a trampoline down there. It's fine. It'll be fun. Like, that's creepy, because it's, because, like I said, there's not really much the boy can do. What's he going to do? It'll just hide underneath the bed. The parents won't believe him and all that. And, same thing. It isn't actively trying, it isn't like, attacking him. It wants him to hurt itself, which I don't think is something that I brought up in last week's anglerfish story, that it's interesting that whatever the entities are, like, you have to make the decision to put yourself in harm's way. They can encourage you, they can entice you, all that, but you have to make the conscious decision. You have to, be the one to, pull the trigger, so to speak. You have to, be the one. And, especially in this, in Mr. Widemouth, you get the impression that, like, that's how this creature or whatever gets its fun, is by convincing, presumably just young people to hurt themselves. Which is like, it's kind of a scary thing, that this thing derives its pleasure from convincing, innocents to hurt themselves. Whether that's also true for anglerfish, I don't know. I don't want to go back to that one too much, but like I said, it's sort of like a tie-in thing with kind of similar themes going on, or similar concepts at least. So let's continue. My mother came to me one morning and told me I had her permission to walk around outside. She thought the fresh air would be good for me, especially after being confined in my room for so long. Ecstatic, I put on my sneakers and trotted out to the back porch, yearning for the feeling of sun on my face. Mr. Widemouth was waiting for me. "I have something I want you to see," he said. I must have given him a weird look, because he then said, "It's safe. I promise." I followed him to the beginning of a deer trail, which ran through the woods behind the house. "This is an important path," he explained. "I've had a lot of friends about your age. When they were ready, I took them down this path, to a special place. You aren't ready yet, but one day I hope to take you there." I returned to the house, wondering what kind of place lay beyond that trail. 2 weeks after I met Mr. Widemouth, the last load of our things had been packed into a moving truck. I would be in the cab of that truck, sitting next to my father for the long drive to Pennsylvania. I considered telling Mr. Widemouth that I would be leaving, but even at 5 years old, I was beginning to suspect that perhaps the creature's intentions were not to my benefit, despite what he said otherwise. For this reason, I decided to keep my departure a secret. My father and I were in the truck at 4 a.m. He was hoping to make it to Pennsylvania by lunchtime tomorrow with the help of an endless supply of coffee and a six-pack of energy drinks. He seemed more like a man who was about to run a marathon rather than one who was about to spend 2 days sitting still. "Early enough for you?" my father asked with a hint of sympathy. There's a question mark at the end of that, and I don't know if there should be. So that's why I gave it like the Ron Burgundy. He'll read anything on there. So yeah. I nodded and placed my head against the window, hoping for some sleep before the sun came up. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder. "This is the last move, son, I promise. I know it's hard for you, as sick as you've been. Once Daddy gets promoted, we can settle down and you can make friends." I opened my eyes as we backed out of the driveway. I saw Mr. Widemouth's silhouette in my bedroom window. He stood motionless until the truck was about to turn onto the main road. He gave a pitiful little wave goodbye, steak knife in hand. I didn't wave back. Years later, I returned to New Vineyard. The piece of land our house stood upon was empty except for the foundation, as the house burned down a few years after my family left. Out of curiosity, I followed the deer trail that Mr. Widemouth had shown me. Part of me expected him to jump out from behind a tree and scare the living bejesus out of me, but I felt that Mr. Widemouth was gone, somehow tied to the house that no longer existed. The trail ended at the New Vineyard Memorial Cemetery. I noticed that many of the tombstones belonged to children. Credited to Perfect Circle 35. So yeah, I like Mr. Widemouth. That's similar to Nazi's Goatman story, where like I've never actually sat down and read it myself. I've heard it read and I've heard it talked about and all that. But yeah, I like that one. It has some good creepy things. It has some good creepy lines. Even if like I said, maybe they're little like I don't know, maybe not predictable or anything like that. Like maybe run of the mill, but the way they're delivered is good, and that's kind of how you do it, right? Like how many times have stories like this been told? So it's all in the delivery and all that. I think maybe like just a random criticism doesn't really matter, but like sort of the last image of Mr. Widemouth waving goodbye with a steak knife, that's kind of a little corny. I know what it's going for. Like he's holding a knife, but he's also sad. and like that image is almost like comedic in a way, than kind of more silly and sinister. Although maybe that kind of suits the character of Mr. Widemouth. Um, I don't know. Like that's just sort of like when I read that, like I didn't get the ooh, like I did with the other, the lines like here's a box full of knives and all that, and try jumping out the window and stuff. And the I wondering about how often he was underneath the bed and such. But yeah, it's overall it's a pretty good one. Like that, the last thing. I don't know, like because I knew it, so it's tough to say. Like the ending is pretty good. Like the fact that because I think when you have this creature telling him, this, or at least kind of speaking for myself, that oh, I've had many young friends like you, and I've taken him to the end of this path and all that. You're suspecting, obviously, something bad is going to be there, but it's one of those. I think because there's sort of this whimsicalness to Mr. Widemouth, you're expecting maybe something a little more supernatural, when really it's just a cemetery with a lot of tombstones that happen to belong to kids. So it's just kind of like there's no, mystical, magical tree or something that Mr. Widemouth is living in or whatever. It's literally just one of these days I'm going to put you in the ground at this cemetery, and I've done it a bunch of times before to all these other little kids. And it's kind of like flat out there, like he just straight murdered these kids in his own way. Like there's no as far as we can tell, there's no like spiriting them away to his lair and all that. It's just flat out he talked these kids into jumping out windows. He made these kids have an accident with knives, stuff like that. And it's just it's kind of very down to earth and brutal. Like juxtaposed against the, like I said, the sort of sinister whimsy of Mr. Widemouth. So does that make sense? The sort of blatant imagery of all these children's tombstones in this graveyard, this memorial cemetery, is like is a contrast, a stark contrast to like I said, the playful menace and all that. Like because it was obvious that Mr. Widemouth was a threat, but he was like you said, he was making it like a game and all that, and so when you see this just flat out, like these kids were found dead and buried here, it's it's a bit of a punch in the gut still. Like you knew what Mr. Widemouth was doing, but you're just kind of getting it becomes real, so to say. And it's like I said before, it's interesting because we don't know what Mr. Widemouth was. The narrator speculates that he was kind of tied to that house, which could be, and that's kind of the part of the fun thing, though, is well, where did he come from? Was he just kind of living in this big house in Maine and waiting for families to move in and convincing the kids to hurt themselves? Or like I said, maybe by chance, was it something that was in our narrator's head because of his illness? Obviously, probably not, because, he moved a box of knives, he opened a window, and most importantly, he told him about this trail that led to a cemetery. So odds are no, he wasn't, fake or imaginary, but just sort of like, where did he come from, and, how does Mr. Widemouth manifest, and how is he, like, if he was just kind of tied to that house, okay, but it's kind of not clear, which is fun, and yeah, it's like I said, it's pretty good. I think it's a pretty solid story, and the concept of the sort of imaginary friend, Although in here, it's kind of less that he's an imaginary friend and more just flat out he's like this little creature that comes and talks to you. But it kind of has the same, uh, kind of same vibe, so maybe you can see why anglerfish made me think of Mr. Widemouth. Uh, the because we've talked about it before, right? The whole nostalgia factor, and obviously that gets played upon a lot in creepypasta, and with good reason because those are cherished memories. And like I said, I've referenced it a lot, and I'm pretty sure I linked it before and all that. The Dead Palace video talking about nostalgia, where the problem with nostalgia is it's a negative feeling. It's a longing for a time past that you cannot reclaim. Obviously nostalgia is very in right now, and sure, it's fun to have stuff from when I was a kid and all that, and you see the stuff. When the new Ghostbusters came out and they re-released Ecto Cooler, and I remember drinking Ecto Cooler all the time, and I was like, I have to have it, and so I have 2 cans still sitting in my fridge because I was like, I just want these to have these. I wanted like a collector's thing. Like I drank like 2 cases of it and like kept 2 cans, and it's just like citrus, like really sweet citrus drink. But that's the thing, like it conjures up these memories, but I can never go back to being a kid and drinking from a juice box with Slimer from the real Ghostbusters on there, and playing with like my Ninja Turtles toys while VHS tape with cartoons recorded off like Fox Kids or whatever, plays, or the Co-Zone and stuff like that. So I just one of those, like, all that stuff, no matter how much you bring back those memories, you can't go back and actually live them again. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the downfall of nostalgia. You're getting that taste of these good feelings from when you were younger, but once they're gone, they're gone, and that's kind of how it is. It's memory. It's fleeting, and no matter what, no matter how many Ecto Cooler juice boxes you drink, no matter how many movies get made from those cartoons you watched when you were a kid, no matter how many shows get rebooted and put on a Netflix and stuff like that, you're never going to be 5 years old again and experiencing those things from the first time, and and genuinely and all that. And that's where the negativity of nostalgia comes from, and that's why it's such a good thing to play upon in horror, which I may have talked about this before, but it's good to bring up because it's such a strong thing, especially with creepypasta. That nostalgia, that feeling is so strong to play upon in horror because it's these cherished memories. So when you play upon things that turn those cherished memories into something bad, sinister, scary, it affects us, just like all those, all these good feelings that we have tied to this thing that we remember from when we were kids. In this case, like, say, an imaginary friend. Like I said, I didn't have an imaginary friend, but a lot of people did, and that's great, and that's fine. A lot of kids, that just, they do, and that's the thing they remember, but, when you have stories like these, when it plays upon, well, maybe that wasn't really an imaginary friend, maybe it was some kind of creature or entity that was, trying to convince you to do things that you didn't want to do, or, there was the chance of that at least. And, and that's the scare, that's the horror, right? Is that, these things that you didn't really believe were real, and all that, but that you had maybe some fun times with may have been out to get you. Mr. Widemouth is a little more like our narrator kind of knew he was a bit off from the start. Because at first he was kind of into it. He's like, "Oh, you look like a Furby. That's fun." And but then Mr. Widemouth, at least in this story, pacing wise, went pretty quick to "Hey, jump out the window. You'll be fine. You'll bounce back up." But not with Mr. Widemouth. It isn't just the imaginary friend factor. It's just sort of the I think it's the author made a really good choice of setting it to where the child was sick and kind of just confined to his room with a fever and all that, because that is another memory. I don't think people are really nostalgic for being a sick kid and just kind of having to lay in bed all day, and your mother comes and tends to you throughout the day and all that. But it's you remember that. You remember having maybe obviously not everybody had mono when they were 5 years old, but you remember the colds, the flus, the earaches and all that, and just laying there and just kind of not really knowing what to do. You just, you could watch TV all day. You're not really supposed to be playing because you're too sick. You can't really do anything. And this story kind of highlights the vulnerability of that. Because, obviously his mother was checking in on him regularly, but she never knew that this creature was there because it would just go hide. And it would just kind of sit underneath his bed, which again was kind of another horror of the monster underneath the bed. And it's just this kind of cute little thing that's just plotting ways how to, tempt you into killing yourself. But yeah, and like I was saying, just that I feel a lot of people kind of have that memory or the experience of being, pretty sick as a kid, and this kind of plays up the vulnerability of that, and because you're not just sick, you're bored, and that's the thing, because you want to do stuff I remember coming home from school one day because I wasn't feeling well, and then I was just so bored in bed. I tried to get up to go do something, and my mom kind of scolded me, told me to go lay back down or whatever. And I got really mad because it was just I was so bored. Even though I got to come home from school and all that, it was just I'm home. I want to be doing something fun here and all that, but I can't because I'm sick. So yeah, that is basically what I'm saying about Mr. Widemouth. This story is it definitely feels like it comes from a place of realism. Obviously, it's not terribly realistic. You have either some kind of spirit or entity or creature or something that this kind of cute little menacing monster that tempts kids into harming themselves. There's obviously a supernatural bent. Because I think there is the or at least I've expressed the theory that potentially Mr. Widemouth was imaginary and a result of our narrator's fever, but I don't think so. I don't think it really wants you to think that. It's just something I thought of as I was reading, but this comes from a place of realism because it kind of, like I said, it plays on some things that I think a lot of us can, relate to or remember kind of experiencing when we were kids. Obviously, this is, kind of special circumstances, aside from the creature, but, the moving around a lot, living in a big mansion or whatever, a big house in Maine and stuff. Maybe not everybody had that, but just this kind of experience of potentially, and not just imaginary things, but the vulnerability of being sick, the boredom of being sick, and just stuck in your room, the and even the fear of something being underneath the bed, and it and it's fun because it kind of twists it a little bit, and you kind of have this more, obviously kind of sinister looking because it has these big features on this small head and all that and body. Uh, um, but the basically, the monster under the bed is this sort of almost cute little fluffy creature, as opposed to some big, menacing monster. And, and just this fluffy creature kind of just blatantly tries to get you to kill yourself. Like, I feel like Mr. Widemouth wasn't that convincing. Like, he laid it on pretty thick. He tried, but, being like, hey, jump out the window and you'll bounce back up, or, hey, juggle with these knives. Like, that's not really subtle. But it's the same thing with, like, anglerfish, where it was like, hey, come do this, even though, obviously, everything, says, like, no, that's the bad thing. And I guess, thinking about it, that's another thing that these stories kind of play on is peer pressure in a way. You saw that more in Anglerfish, which I kind of wish I would have talked about then, like the peer pressure aspect, especially in the teenage section. I kind of got hung up on like other aspects of that, but yeah, so maybe not peer pressure, but like in this case at least, like innocence, and trusting nature of children and all that. And it's another thing that this horror is playing upon. That kind of, as long as you have something that looks like a Furby, you're at risk of listening to it and taking direction from it and all that, because you can trust it. It's cute. It's not a big ugly monster or anything like that. It's a cute little fluffy monster. So obviously, it must be, nice and fun and telling the truth. Yeah, like, so that, that whole, like I said, it's more innocence in this case. And like, fortunately for our narrator, he was pretty on the ball from the start. He knew that, these situations were trouble and such. But yeah, I think that about wraps it. I feel like I've covered a lot. I talked for a while there, and I think I kind of touched on everything. Yeah, like I said, I like Mr. Widemouth. I think it's a pretty good story. There's some good creepy moments in there, some good concepts and all that. I don't know what we're gonna do next week. Let's see. I really kind of want to do maybe something different and fresh. But we'll see. I've also just kind of had fun reading stories that I don't know, and I have fun reading stories that I do know, and just talking about them and all that. So we'll see. There isn't usually too much activity in the comments on the videos at the moment. Usually now and then I might have Destiny commenting and all that, which is always appreciated. But yeah, like, if there's anything, if anybody's listening and there's anything you're kind of curious and want to hear and all that, go ahead and throw some suggestions out. I'd be glad to take them and into consideration and all that. Just kind of keep the show fun and all that, because I think we're having fun here. I'm having fun doing this. I wouldn't be doing it still if I didn't. I'm not, like I said it before, I'm not making money doing this, so obviously I'm having fun doing it. But yeah, I think that's gonna about do it. Yeah, for sure. That's gonna be it. I've covered everything as far as I can tell. But yeah, I think I like these last two episodes. I feel like it kind of got us talking. Well, the last three episodes, really. I think we're firing on some cylinders here. Hopefully you've enjoyed them as well, because I think this kind of like, these last three have been really fun to record and talk about and all that. We kind of are on a good streak right now, and I'm not looking forward to having that streak broken. But yeah, with that, I'll I'll bid you guys adieu. Thanks again for listening, as always. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. All the relevant links are below. The link for the story, link for social media for the show, and all that. Please check it out. Subscribe and share and all that. Follow the Twitter and Facebook and such. Yeah, that definitely does it. So I will talk to you guys next time. Later.